I got a request from a viewer asking me to make a video about a certain type of crab in the bucket Negro. Now, I made a previous video before about crab in the bucket Negros, and that was just a general video, but inside the family, we have a different type of crab in a bucket Negro. And this crab in the bucket Negro, it can be a mother, a father, a brother, or a sister, and they'll sit there and they'll say, I don't want, my son to do better than me. And I've heard this, you know, in my own family from some relatives. They sit there and they'll say, I don't want my, son to do better than me, or I don't want my daughter to do better than me. It's basically the older generation feeling guilty and ashamed that they did not take the opportunity to use the tools in front of them to move their life ahead. And they're upset that, a son or a daughter or a grandson took the tools that were presented to them and used them to move their lives to the next level. And some of these people, they want to be the crab in the bucket to tell you, don't go to school, don't go to work, don't aspire to do better. They'll say that you're acting white. They'll say that you're talking white. They don't want to see you, move your life ahead. When it is the pride of a family to see, a son or a daughter move their lives ahead and do better than the last generation. That's, showing growth. And that's what every good parent wants to encourage. They want to see their son, go out and finish school. They want to see their sons go to college or their daughters go to college. They want to see their sons go out here and get a job or start a business. That shows a natural progression. That shows that the next generation learned how to do better than the previous generation. But we have some people in the Negro community, some of these crabs in a bucket, who would rather see their children, remain right there at the bottom with them, not understanding that all you're teaching your children to do is be a failure. Because if your child is doing just as bad as you are, or even worse, what does that say about you as a parent? It basically says you're a failure. That's basically what you're telling your kids. You weren't good enough, to raise your child to try to do better than you did. I have seen this, happen in families, and even in my own, and it's just a dysfunctional way of thinking. I don't want my son to go on to go get a college education because he's going to do better than me, and you're feeling guilty because you didn't take advantage of the tools, that were in front of you to move your life forward. So now you want to try to sabotage this young man or this young woman and keep them from going on to do better than you. And that's really grimy. That's really ratchet. And, it shows how dysfunctional many people in the black community are. I mean, what would you rather have? A son who goes out and finishes college or starts his own business or gets a decent job, or the son who sits up under you, and you're continuing to caretake him into his adulthood. And he's sitting there, 25, 30, even 40 years old, sitting on your sofa, continuing to watch cheesy talk shows like Maury and, having beefs and YouTube arguments with other grown men. Is that what you would rather see? Or would you rather see or your daughter, instead of going out and going to college and having a career, she's sitting up in your house, with her kids, showing that, oh, she's not doing better than you. She's actually doing worse than you. And both of them are doing worse than you. Basically, you maintaining a codependent relationship where your children remain, under you, and they feel powerless. They're basically stuck in a state of arrested development where they're at a mental age of about 17 or 18 years old at the most, and 13 and 14 at the least. They have showing that they have not grown at all to sate your ego. And that's what that really is. When you don't want your son or your daughter to do better than you, you're basically saying, that you want to remain a mother to a child who, who should have been out on their own years ago, who should have had their own place years ago, who should have had their own family, years ago. This is what this child should have had, but because you, with your low self-esteem and your bruised ego, You don't want to see that child grow up to be the man or the woman that they could be, or even better yet, be a better man or a better woman than you could be. And that's what you feel really bad about, is that if this person grows up and starts to learn the lessons that you didn't learn, they will eventually rise to become a better person than you were. They will learn, from your mistakes. And again, that's basically showing that this child has grown. This child has, learned. And they are making efforts to move forward, because that's what the next generation is supposed to do. The next generation is supposed to learn lessons from the past generation of what mistakes not to make. They're supposed to learn, from your failures, and they're supposed to learn what to do to avoid those failures, because that means when a child has learned from your mistakes and has learned what to do, guess what? They're going to go on to be a success. And that means you indirectly were a success. So that means you have raised a successful child. But because so many of these Negroes have self-hate and self-esteem issues, they would rather maintain a codependent relationship where they remain the so-called mother or the so-called father in control of these children, instead of seeing, growing into an interdependent relationship where the child eventually grows to be able to take care of themselves, and you learn eventually how to take care of yourself by learning from them. And that's something that, you know, that's what a healthy relationship is. Eventually, the child is raised to a point where they can go out and take care of their needs and, put themselves first. And they don't have to look to someone to take care of them. But we don't see that, a lot in your African American communities. Instead, we see these codependent relationships where these mothers try to attach emotional hoses onto especially their sons, for years on end, and they have this, disturbing surrogate son, surrogate husband relationship where the boy never learns how to connect, you know, with other people. He never learns how to have healthy, balanced relationships with women outside of his family, or even with people outside of his family. And the daughters, they're just out here, and they never learn how to have healthy relationships with men because they don't know how to have, because they've never seen it modeled. And this is what happens when you have people thinking the whole idea of, he's not going to do better than me, or she's not going to do better than me, because these Negroes, they have this crab in a bucket mentality where they feel jealous of their sons and their daughters, and they feel jealous of their accomplishments in places like school or the workplace, and they make passive aggressive attempts to sabotage that person, instead of realizing that the further this person goes, the better it is for the entire family, because each person who moves forward can help another person move forward, and each person who does better can help the next generation do better. And instead of us having a culture of dysfunction, we can have a culture of interdependence and people learning from the next generation on how to do better and to be better in terms of values and character. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.